I'm COO at TLB and the co-founder of One NDA and Clawstack. Really excited to be here.
And we have Todd. Todd.
Hi, everyone. Todd Smithline. I'm the CEO of Bond Terms, and I'm also very excited to be here.
Amazing. Todd, so what is Bond Terms?
So Bond Terms is a new initiative we launched back in September, and we're going to bring best practice open source forms to market, which might sound familiar to everyone here. We're in the US. We launched a mutual NDA, but our first really big form is our cloud terms. So we've released a standardized set of cloud terms that allows anyone to enter into a commercial agreement for the use of SaaS or cloud services. And the way our system works is that we have a base agreement, the cloud terms that you invoke through a cover page. You fill in the key details on the cover page, and the cover page is what you exchange, and the cover page is what you negotiate. So in a short sentence, that's what we're doing at Bond Terms.
Great. And Todd, why did you start Bond Terms?
So I have been practicing in enterprise software and enterprise SaaS for 30 years now. I was a law firm lawyer. I was an in-house lawyer, general counsel, and then I ran my own law firm for the last 17 years. And one thing that is clear to many of us in the field, I know it became very clear to you, is that there's a lot of inefficiency in how we conduct commercial contracting. And that inefficiency exists because either party to a commercial transaction is being asked to start at zero. One of the two parties is always being asked to start at zero. One party is preparing a form, they're sending it to the other party, and the receiving party, whether the party is the vendor or the customer, whoever wins the battle of the forms, there's always a loser. The loser is the party who has to receive that form and has to start negotiating off that form. And that creates tremendous inefficiencies because they have to take a form that was drafted typically with only one party in mind, and that was slanted towards one of the parties. And the first thing they have to do is bring it back to center. Second thing they have to do, of course, is make it work for their particular needs. So as with many in the industry, we've thought for a long time, boy, wouldn't it be nice if we had a place to start that wasn't drafted by either party, that was designed to be balanced or to at least reflect the needs of both parties. And most importantly, that was easy to customize, that was easy to implement by cover page. So we could change the core definitions that we need to change. We could change the core settings around what's within or without various parts of the limitation of liability, what's within or without the scope of the indemnity, the governing law, the court data definitions, other things we really care about, right? If we could have the conversation around warranty, indemnity, limitation of liability, and ultimately around compliance, around GDPR and CCPA, if we could have those conversations when we meet each other as vendor and customer, but not have to have a conversation around rewriting how the notice, control, and cooperation language in the indemnity works, right? So move the conversation to the parts of the contract that the parties really care about. And also, and this was sort of always in the back of my mind, but it's become much more clear now that we've launched our cloud terms, help reduce the acrimony in that conversation. You know, one of the things we hear from people using the forms is we like starting with standards. We like not having to argue about whose form to use, but we really like starting the conversation with a little less acrimony, starting the conversation in a more collaborative place. And so for all those reasons, that's why we started Bond Terms.
We're with you 100%. So it's very similar to why we started One NDA, which some people may have heard the story before, but I'll just go over it briefly. So back in 2020, we had our biggest growth year at TLB, and we reviewed lots and lots of contracts. And at the end of the year, we did a review of all the contracts that we'd looked at over the course of the year and found that 63% of those were NDAs, but that only accounted to 7% of our revenue. And we decided that, you know, as a business, our mission has always been to streamline in-house legal and to help lawyers work smarter. But this wasn't a problem that we could tackle by working with individual clients. It was an industry problem. And maybe it was my background in the space industry where standardization is a thing. But we said, why don't we just create one NDA that everyone agrees to agree to? And then we all start from the same neutral starting point And then we don't have to have this battle of the forms and negotiations over things that don't matter. And the NDA was ripe for that, because who cares? It's an NDA. It's not going to be litigated, really, is it? Let's be real. So we decided to start up One NDA, and we launched it in August 2020, and we've since launched a revised version in last week. And the reason we launched the revised version was because we've been collating feedback on version 1 for the past 6 months, and we had repeated issues with One NDA and points that people were raising. So of course we had to listen to improve the form, because that's what you do with any good product. So we've now issued One NDA version 2, and we have 600 companies that have formally adopted it, including some really big names, but also lots of small businesses and SMEs that don't really want to pay to get an NDA template or pay a lawyer to review a template to tell them whether it's balanced or not. So it's a real good for the community, if you like, but also business more broadly. And the thing that we've had reported to us the most from companies that have been using it, because we know that there are more than 600 companies using it, there are around 2,500 that are using it. We have heard that the best thing about it is that it's neutral, and that it didn't get created by one side. So when you send it to the other side, there's no mistrust. They don't think, oh, that's your form. I bet you've made it very in your favor, and so I don't trust this. I need to go and review it. The fact that it's neutral gives you leverage. And that means you save time, you save money, you save relationships, you don't delay your revenue, that NDAs often do. So there's loads of positives to this. And we've also created One NDA M&A. So this is an NDA that's fit for purpose for an M&A transaction, because One NDA V1 was for your run-of-the-mill, let's enter into a conversation about business collaboration or whatever, whereas this other NDA is specific to M&A, so it's kind of fit for purpose for a broader audience. And in the process, yes, Todd?
No, and I meant to say this at the beginning, so I just want to add, you've done a tremendous job, and that's why I'm really excited to be here. I mean, I come to this from being in practice for a very long time, from staring at this problem, from looking at this problem, from a lot of people talking about this problem, and from nobody doing anything about this problem. And you had this insight, and then you executed it beautifully. And so you've done a tremendous job coming into an industry that does not like to innovate, that innovates very slowly, that's very protective of everything that it does. The workflows in legal look a lot like they did 200 years ago, for the most part, right? So I want to congratulate you. I think you really, you both and One NDA have done a terrific job getting this idea out there, being successful with it, getting people comfortable with standardization. And so that's been really helpful to us. We also, ran a committee for ours. We've got 40 lawyers who I should mention and thank for being on the committee and helping us draft. Where we are looking up towards your levels of adoption and hoping to get there. I think we're very close to 1,000 downloads, which we're very excited about. Just to be to where we are after having our cloud terms out for since last month. But I want to say, I think what you've done is remarkable and has been very helpful for the entire movement of standardization, and has been frankly helpful for the industry. And I mentioned this on LinkedIn yesterday, and as I mentioned to you at the start of the call, I'm here for a conference in Santa Cruz about some of these same issues. And of course, when you start talking about open source forms and standard forms, everybody says, have you heard of One NDA? So I wanted to make sure to mention that I think what you've done is a tremendous, both really impressive, but also really helpful to the community and to the industry.
Thanks, Todd. I think we were ready for it. I think the community was ready for it.
Yeah. I think this is kind of a bit of a tipping point where we start to gain real efficiencies in the industry as a whole, because standardization is one part of it that enables other innovations to work better. So I think this will also be the age of the CLM, because if you have standard forms at the bottom, CLMs can work much more efficiently, contract comparison software can work much more efficiently, AI can work much more efficiently. And without that standardization base, they really don't have the leverage to be able to do all the amazing things that they can do. So it's sort of I can really see the efficiencies snowballing from here on in.
But as obvious as it seems now, you're the ones who did it, and you had that was a big hill to climb. So it was well done.
Thanks, Todd.
Thank you. Thank you. Just on the AI bit, I think that in the future, what would be amazing is if you could use AI instead of to review and interpret reams of words, which is what we use AI in law for now, we could use it so that we can predict what to put in our contracts to avoid litigation or to avoid a dispute. You know, predictive stuff, things that are going to be really smart, not things that are just going to digitize a horrendous process, which is the current use of AI in law.
Yeah.
If we want to be transformative, we have to rethink how we do things.
Yeah.
And as a lawyer, I've never loved reviewing contracts. I mean, it can be fun at the beginning when you start to understand them, but when you get to the point where you're reviewing them every single day and they're really, really complicated, it's just not the most rewarding thing for many lawyers. So for our profession as well, if we were to standardize, it's not that we'd be out of a job, it's just that we'd be doing more fun jobs, more strategic jobs, things that are adding more value, if we just all work for a standard form.
Sorry, Electra. Don't you think it's super interesting as well that these two initiatives kind of took off at a similar time across different sides of the pond, where people actually want to be working more collaboratively? And you said that, you know, to reduce the acrimony in relationships, that was a key reason why we did One NDA as well, because we wanted to reduce that horrible battle of the forms when you first start engaging and people engaging on a principles basis rather than on a wordsmithing basis. It's quite interesting that the whole legal industry is moving away from this sort of adversarial attitude and more towards, I don't know, maybe sort of a software product-led counsel, which is where the industry is going.
In part, I think it's the move to CLMs and AI coming in that has caused people to realize how much easier these workflows would be, how much more efficient we could be if we were working from structured data.
Yeah.
If we could reduce what the AI had to do to a set of fields, so the AI doesn't have to decide, is this an indemnity? Am I giving indemnity? Am I receiving indemnity? What's the scope of this indemnity? Is this like one I've seen before? Is it 1 through 10? Is it green, yellow, red? Instead, if you could, if you're working from structured data, there's amazing things that AI can do that becomes immensely more helpful if you simply reduce the task, right, of what it has to look at. And so in a weird way, to Electra's point about how we're sort of digitizing these old workflows, but I think one of the things we're realizing as we do that is that, okay, these systems all assume infinitely complex contracts, right? That's sort of the starting, defining supposition of many of these systems, which, by the way, are incredibly helpful. Don't get me wrong, but I think that they're complicated and it's hard to pull off because of the breadth of what these systems have to contemplate in terms of the types of agreements and also in terms of clauses within agreements, right? And variability. If you instead say, as humans, okay, computer, we're going to simplify the input. We're going to only ask you to look at certain fields, and all of a sudden, it's, you know, real efficiencies can be gained, not only in how we negotiate, but also in what we're asking the CLMs and the AI to do. So I think it all kind of fits together really well.
I went to a conference late last year, and there was an AI tech company talking, Thought River actually, and Thought River did a review of their contract base, and they found that within a sample of 350,000 contracts, the same clause, which I think it was the entire agreement clause, was expressed 147,000 different ways. Why? Let's just have it once. It's an entire no. You don't ever read that stuff in detail anyway. When you get a contract, let's be real. Why don't we just
looks fine.
It's fine.
Yeah, the beautiful thing about standardization also, and as you've learned, think about the fact that you're now on the next version, right? So the beautiful thing about standardization, one of the things we hope to learn from your process, and I'm excited about Clawstack for, is that you have so many people looking at the language at scale, right? So you start with a committee. We started with a committee. We like our committee. They're really smart. We think we did a good job. But of course, it's a different thing to really expose it at scale, right? And so now you're able to have a tremendous number of people all operating on the same set of terms. And to the extent you didn't quite get that entire agreement clause right, or to the extent there's a variable that you need to introduce to that clause, or to the extent you want to add an alternative or do it differently, you've now got this information at scale, right? That really helps you train that language, which is sort of unfortunate because most CLMs, or all basically, is everybody operating within their own system. So whatever wisdom they're gaining from the system can really only ever benefit themselves in the forms that they're producing. Whereas what you've done is created this open, I don't want to call it open AI, but in essence, what you've done is created a system that allows for all of the thinking of everybody focusing on and doing deals on, and in your case, your NDA, hopefully for us, it will be our cloud terms, and then say, okay, well, we really know now a slightly better way to write the governing law. We can look at what the law says. We can consult with each other as attorneys, as law professors, but now we've got also the wisdom of the crowd, and all that together, helps you really refine the language to the right place.
Yeah, and I think that's such a waste in the legal industry. And that brings me nicely to the next thing, which is Clawstack. So within the legal industry, we do not have the concept of open knowledge sharing. If you look at the software industry, you've got GitHub, you've got Stack Overflow, you've got these platforms that are a staple within that profession. And software developers, because they came to it and everything was quite new, they needed to talk to each other to solve really complex new problems that hadn't, I can't believe this.
Uh-oh.
I was going to say it'll stop.
Sorry, I actually did unmute.
I could carry on, but I don't need to.
Sorry, that only happens when we have webinars.
Yes. What time even is it? I think that's a real one.
It's a random time, 11:19. So sorry about that, everyone. Yeah. So within the software developer industry, it's just a staple, right? And in law, we've got such complex stuff to solve. New regulation coming along all the time, changes to the way we work, to technology, ESG, all these things that are new. What's your COVID sickness policy? There's all these things that we don't know how to solve, but we're not sharing knowledge. So what if we all came together on a platform to share knowledge and to work together and collaborate to create better ways of working? So when we were doing One NDA, it became really apparent that there was not just appetite for standardization, but also appetite to collaborate and to work together as a community. So we actually asked the One NDA community, which is now up to, I think we have 10,000 members almost. So lots of people, we asked them, why did you get involved? Why are you giving us your time? It's precious. And about half of the respondents said, because we hate NDAs and we want a standardized one, fair. And then the other half said something along the lines of, we like the idea of working with our peers to solve a common problem. That's really empowering, because in law, you're always waiting for someone to come and tell you what to do. There's a legislator, there's case law, there's an association, but taking the power into your own hands and going, right, this process is stupid. I'm going to change it. I'm going to work with my peers to create a new NDA or a new cloud services agreement or a new way of working and adopt it. And that will make my life easier. The business that I work for will be grateful because I'm not a bottleneck and I'm not costing them loads of money anymore. So that's why we created Clawstack. And Clawstack is a community platform that allows people to come together to collaborate on standardization projects. But there's also a community. So we'll see how that grows. There's a community kind of forum, and we'll see how that grows and how people start to share knowledge. But I think it's time that we all started working more collaboratively and in a more standardized way. And if we start doing that, the way we work will completely transform, I think.
Agree.
And I agree. I mean, as a lawyer, I can't tell you how many times I've been asked the question, I found something on Stack Overflow, can I use it, right, from an engineer? Or we as a law firm, we advise our clients in open source. For 20 years, I've been talking to companies about their use of open source, and it went from a very small thing they were using to 90% of their stack, right? I mean, today, nobody building new application, including us, when we're going to build an application ultimately ourselves, nobody would start from writing every line of code themselves. They pile up as much open source as they possibly can, and they write an application layer of logic that really reflects their special thinking and what they want their app to do, if they even write code at all anymore with no code. And so to have a resource for lawyers to collaborate, and I really appreciate this word collaboration, and that was the other thing that's come up for us. First was less acrimony. Second was, boy, isn't this nice to be together as lawyers from different law firms, from different companies, some who are typically customers, some who are typically vendors, some who are both, right? And to have a conversation about these things that bedevil us all every day in our individual practices, and to have a cross conversation and to collaborate together. This is something the legal community has not done, or has done very, very little of. And so I applaud this move that you're making. I think it's terrific. And I think there is this innate desire of lawyers to cooperate with each other if we just give them the opportunity to do so.
Actually, I think people are fearful. I think that's why it hasn't taken off to date, because you know, and lawyers are in their own organization and they have to really back what they're saying, because the buck lies with them. People come to them and ask for them for a definitive decision, and it's kind of, it puts you in a vulnerable position if you need to go and ask your peers. You can get a bit worried, which is the whole idea behind Clawstack as well, is that it's meant to be a nice, safe space where people can share their ideas and introduce themselves, and you know, kind of de-risk that. I think in law firms, you're taught and you're rewarded for hoarding information on behalf of your firm. So it's a complete mindset shift as well. But people are totally on board with it, clearly, which is great.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, law students and people who are coming up in the profession are really going to appreciate that. They would love a place to go to learn these things, to participate, to try out their ideas. And so I think it's a great idea.
Great. Well, the next thing that we wanted to talk about is more practical, and those are the changes that we introduced to One NDA. And Roisin did a lot of the heavy lifting on that, so I'll hand over to you.
Cool. I'll just share my screen. I will also show bond terms at some point as well. So let me know. Sure. I've got it open. So I'll quickly run through the changes that have been made to One NDA v2, and then I'll also show you One NDA plus M&A and the changes that have been made there. So this is Clawstack, for those of you who haven't jumped in here already. And within the library, you have all of the different standards that have been created. So here we have One NDA and One NDA M&A. So for each of these, we have the release notes for the new version. So we have One NDA v2 release notes here. So it's all written out here, but I will just run through each of the changes quickly as well for you. So in One NDA v1, we had a front page which essentially introduced One NDA, the concept behind it, why you're not meant to amend it, if you want to sign up, where you can go to take part. We've removed that for v2 because it made it quite long, and we assume that most people who are engaged with One NDA now know what it is. The single biggest piece of feedback that we had on One NDA v1 was that the boxes were too small to add all of the information that you needed to add. So that has been updated, because it has now been issued in Word. So you can write as much as you like for your entity details. And we've also moved certain things around just to make it a bit more clear, because again, as part of our feedback, we had, when we surveyed the community, 75% of people said that the people that filling this document out will be the business. So we're trying to make it as clear as possible for them. So executed by was a little bit confusing for business people. So we've changed that to signature and moved it up front. We've also made One NDA quadripartite, so you can have tripartite or 4 people if you want to sign with, and you can delete that. We've updated the dispute resolution method. So previously we had an optional arbitration provision down in the main agreement or litigation. We've just called that out more clearly here. And we also received feedback that you can really only choose one or the other. You can't have both. So we've made it clear that you can only choose one of those here. There are some stylistic changes, but there's also here in this 1A, we've made clear that confidential information includes information that's also been disclosed to your affiliates and your permitted receivers, as well as just the receiver. Affiliates, the definition here has been extended to cover more entities. So previously we just had sort of traditional corporates covered, but we've extended it to cover funds and partnership structures, because there were a lot of law firms actually who were part of the drafting group, and large consultancies who were struggling to adopt on that basis because their affiliates weren't covered. Permitted receivers has just been moved up here because they're included here, so there's no change to that definition. There's been an update to exclusions from confidential information. So information that's also been disclosed to your permitted receivers is also no longer confidential information. So that was again in response to feedback. Affiliates has just been moved up. Permitted receivers has also been moved up. Here in terms of who you can share it with. So previously you could only share confidential information that you were allowed to by law. Sorry, you were required to by law. But now this has been updated to required by law or regulation, because a lot of banks, we have feedback from people who work for banks who said, you know, we need to disclose it for regulatory obligations or as required by regulators. So you can now do that. The changes here to what are my confidentiality obligations. There's a stylistic change here to clarify that within 30 days of the disclosures request, you'll take reasonable steps to erase or destroy the information. This is literally just a movement thing, because we had a few comments that said that actually the way this was drafted, it wasn't clear what needed to happen within 30 days. So we've just moved that. And the exceptions to the erasure or disclosure, erasure or returning obligation are that you can now also retain it for bona fide record retention in line with your record retention policies. And that's to cover instances where you need to retain information in board minutes or for other record retention purposes that you've got policies, written policies for. The changes to clause 5 are, so previously it said that the receiver's duty to protect confidential information lasted for a certain period. We've clarified that to actually say that all of the receiver's obligations will last for the confidentiality period, not just their duty to protect. Which again, this is all super helpful feedback from the community. So thank you, everyone.
Really helpful.
And just to run through quickly, the final changes, these all relate to amending the NDA so that it applies in a tripartite or quadripartite scenario. So rather than saying either party, it's just a party, neither goes to no and neither no. And again, that's just a changing party to plural. Final couple of changes. So here we've added a counterparts clause, and this was in response to feedback from lots of international companies, including specifically Japan was a big one for this, that they need a counterparts clause to be included for it to be enforceable in Japan and usable. And these changes to governing law and dispute resolution relate to the change I mentioned above, where it's just clarifying that you can only choose one dispute resolution method. And that was a lot of information, I appreciate. So, you know, read it and review it in your own time. But what was quite interesting about this is that we started from the principles basis as to what went into One NDA and what was excluded. And then once we were then released V0, and we had a lot of feedback that we were then able to incorporate on a words basis. But as you mentioned earlier, Todd, like we started from not looking at this sort of wordsmithing bit, because it's not a good way to get to a good document if we just started with this and put this out to the community and ask people to comment, because people get really bogged down in the words. We start at principles and then put something out and got this really refined version of One NDA. So yeah, that two-stage approach is really, really important, I think, in this whole standardization process. I don't know.
Thank you for that.
The nuance is fantastic at this level. You can really tell that people are using it. One of the things that was nice for us when we first circulated drafts of the cloud agreement, particularly different law firms, and got these very extensive comments back, we thought, oh, I think they may use this thing, you know, and this is it's really exciting what you're seeing here too. People, they want to make these changes because they want to use the form and they need it to cover whatever they need it to cover. So it's really terrific. I'm also sitting here wondering, did we leave enough space in our
yeah, go back and check that. Go back and check. But yeah, I think what's so good about the feedback as well is that all the feedback that was upvoted, the most popular feedback it wasn't pedantic feedback. I mean, you know, pedantic in the scheme of lawyers. It was feedback that you thought, well, that makes complete sense. And everyone was very sensible as to what feedback ought to be upvoted and what feedback should absolutely be discounted. So yeah, thank you to everyone who took part in this. It's really, really great.
Yeah, really great. Thank you. Rashid, since you have bond terms open,
Yes.
we hop onto bond terms, and Todd, you can talk us
Tell me
through.
where to go.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. And again, I apologize because I'm on my phone. I don't have great Wi-Fi where I am, so I appreciate you putting it up on the screen. So just really quickly, everyone, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but bond terms, let's just show you the cloud terms. If you page down a little bit on the screen. Okay, great. Actually, if you don't mind going back just real quickly to that page and just page down, I want to point out about how our system works. Very, very similar to One NDA in the sense that we have our core terms and you implement it. The one slight difference is we implement via cover page. So you link to the bond terms. You can attach them as a PDF, but the way the system works is through a cover page, and the cover page links to the terms you're just showing. So if you click on the HTML link for the cover page or the Word version, this is just an example, but if you page down a little bit here, you'll see that first sentence, and it says that by executing this cover page, you invoke the bond terms, cloud terms version 1. So we've tried to create what we call a completely headless system, meaning that you can utilize our system simply by linking to our terms. Our terms are available on our website. They're available on GitHub. You can also attach the terms to the package that you sign if there's a concern about using a link. But the idea with us is we've taken it even a slight step further, if I might say, than One NDA to say, look, you can use bond terms with your own cover page. All you need to do is invoke bond terms with that link, and then you can create your own cover page. So what you're looking at here is actually just an example cover page. But as you can see from looking at this, you fill in the key terms, you attach your core documents, so your SLA, your DPA, your support policy, and then you see that last row there called additional terms. That's really where you're allowed to change whatever you need to change within the core terms themselves, within the cloud terms themselves. I'll just preempt the question because I know it's coming. Are you working on a DPA? Yes, we are. We will have a DPA. We will have an SLA, support policy. So we'll have a set of standard attachments that folks can use. Be patient on the DPA. It turns out to be quite difficult to bring together a bunch of law firms and a bunch of privacy counsel to come up with a single DPA, but we are working on that. It's going quite well so far. But again, just to say that the way our system works is that you invoke our terms by a link, and or you can attach them as a PDF, but importantly, as exactly the same as One NDA, you don't redline the underlying terms themselves. And if you'll just pop back to our homepage for me real quick. We also have a few other things. We have an explainer. You see the explainer. So you just mentioned that one of the things you did between One NDA version 1 and 2 was you removed that language, that copy that sort of told the story about what is a standard NDA, right? And why would I use this? So we've put that story, as it were, at a link called our explainer. So if you're sending out an agreement, a cover page that utilizes bond terms, you can link to that explainer, which sort of tells the story. Who wrote this? Why would this be a good place for me to start my transaction? And you can see a link to our committee. You can learn more about who the folks are behind bond terms. And we did that by a link. We also have a toolkit of changes you might want to make. And this will all these resources will expand and grow over time. Our cloud terms and our NDA themselves are licensed under CC BY. Pretty much everything else is CC0, which is no copyright. So we don't want you to change the underlying terms themselves. If you do, it's not bond terms anymore, right? It's just a pile of words. We think they're good words, but you lose the benefits of standardization if you do that. But our system is very flexible in the sense that you can create your own cover page and you can do what you want on the cover page. So that's thank you for letting me share that, and thank you for showing it. And that's just a quick story on what we are. We are US based, so our forms, we have an NDA and we have these cloud terms. You'll notice one difference is that we are drafted towards US laws and a US conception. I think it's very close, of course, to UK and EU, but it's not exactly the same. So the other thing I mentioned, I hope people will check out our forms and I hope you'll use them. I hope you'll contact us if you have any questions. Love to hear from you. But it is a US based system.
Great. And I love the way that you've done it, incorporating the terms by reference. That's something that we discussed at length as well, and it could be a future iteration of One NDA. But I really like it. It's really neat. And I also
Thank
agree,
you.
because we've had some comments on One NDA, the fact that we haven't been flexible with the variations to One NDA. And what we say is that it's like having an Android versus an Apple device. You know, Apple just says this is how it is. It's not really, you can't really do much with it, but it's good enough as it is. And then you have Android, which is much more malleable, and you can tailor it. So we're on the Apple side with the NDA, but I do appreciate the need for flexibility when it comes to more complex agreements. So if we do a complex agreement like an MSA, for example, there will definitely need to be the space to add additional terms. So totally get it. And I really like the way that you did it, where you add the additional terms, because then you don't have to review the terms, the baseline terms, to see where the red lines are. So it's really neat.
Todd, could I ask you a question about how that works?
Of course.
People, for the additional terms, can people, you know, add a term from the cloud terms and mark it up in redline, or is it just for additional terms, or do you say ignore clause 6, you know, whatever?
So thank you for asking this. We do have some examples in that toolkit. What I would say is it's designed so that it's easy to change things like, so we've put a lot of definitions in, we've put a lot of short sections in, we've thought a lot about the language, we've thought about what are things people are going to want to change. For example, definition of customer data. For example, definition of usage data. For example, permitted use. So there's certain things we know in a cloud agreement, for it to be useful, there's going to be variability, right? So the idea there is you'd simply say definition of customer data is changed to the following, right? Okay. If you decide you want to rewrite how the notice control and cooperation language works in the indemnity, then you would say we replace this section with the following. Okay. It is our hope, however, that folks will rely, will be able to rely, I should say, right? It's our hope that we drafted this in a way that will allow them to rely on the standard language in great part, and not actually have to go in and section by section with the kind of notwithstanding this, that, and the other thing. Yeah. Because if the cover page becomes a huge litany of changes, then we lose the benefit of standardization also. So this was I should mention, it was 8 months, 6 drafts, 4 subcommittee, 1 on risk, 1 on data, 1 on general, and 1 on design. Like we worked the process quite intensely on our committee, which is now up to, I think, about 40 lawyers. But we're going to learn as people deploy. It's also my hope that with Clawstack and features like that, people are going to be able to find common objects to customize that allow them to very elegantly and quickly solve common problems, right? So it may be that our form doesn't exactly reflect your particular cloud platform, your particular SaaS service, or on the customer side, your particular, we just talked about affiliates. You talked about maybe 4 companies need to sign this thing, right? Maybe I'm regulated in a certain way and I need to change the definition of what a law is, right? Somebody in the chat said, what about a stock exchange? Yeah. So it's the hope, our hope is that although for each customer or vendor, those are important, they're are individual, they're also common usually, right? To some extent, these same problems. And so our hope is that, boy, wouldn't it be cool if you could configure a cover page with common objects that solve that problem, but which language is common, right? Which is also standardized, and you can really then get to real efficiency. So this is why we're so excited about Clawstack, because I see these 2 things fitting together perfectly, right? You take a standard form that was designed to mostly be left alone, but to be highly configurable, and then you add to it a library of possibilities, and boy, at the end of that workflow, then you really have something.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's actually why it's called that. I mean, actually you can do the analogy, but that was the original sort of conception of the name.
I mean, you can stack your clauses. That's the end vision. Stack. And you use clauses like Lego blocks to build contracts rather than to draft them. And I think we have a long way to go until we can actually push a concept like that out. And standardization is definitely the first step. But Clawstack, the name Clawstack came from a brainstorming session where we decided that stacking your clauses would be the way forward. I'm just going to hop to some questions from some of our participants. So Isabel's saying, in terms of the Clawstack open source proposition, is there a difference in mindset between corporate legal teams and law firms? Yes, I think there is. I think we've seen some really innovative private practice lawyers that have come to the table, and they were, some of our first adopters of Clawstack and One NDA, and others not so much. And I think that the reason is that when you're in a law firm, I think to Roisin's point earlier, you have this mindset of, I can't really ask a question because it's scary to ask a question. You can't say, hello, I'm from this law firm and I have this question and I'm relying on the community when you've got potentially 600 lawyers sitting in your office. So yeah, I think corporate legal teams are going to be more open to this because there's less of that fear. They're trying to solve business problems every single day that are burning, and they're their problems. They're not their clients' problems. And I'm not saying that your clients' problems are less important, but you're feeling the pain. And also, often you'll get lawyers that work in very small teams or by themselves in an organization, and they just don't have that, they don't have that kind of sounding board or someone to share ideas with. So I think this will be really useful for in-house lawyers to begin with, and then hopefully later on law firms too.
Can I add something to that, which is it's been really interesting from our experience? And I almost have to apologize for saying something good about big firms here, but we've had been really pleasantly surprised by the level of support and involvement of the firms on our committee. Across firms. We happen to have a law firm that's an investor, but I mean, very independently from that, we have a large number of law firms, and maybe this is a Silicon Valley thing because they're mostly, but not exclusively, Silicon Valley based, who are really participating with us, who are really helping with the drafting, who are really thinking hard about this. And I think that you with One NDA and what we're trying to do, we've tapped into something that there really is this desire to collaborate, as we've talked about before. But we've had, really strong support from the law firms, and that's been both surprising and also terrific. It's helped us deliver a better product. Let me just be honest about that.
For sure.
And it's also hopefully going to help to drive better adoption. I think the firms are really ready for innovation. That I think it's hard for them to innovate within the firms because of their existing structures, the billable hour, many other things we could talk about for days. But this, I think what we're giving them is an opportunity to innovate sort of outside their standard structure, right? And so obviously the in-house groups are 100% behind this, but the law, we've had good involvement and frankly, surprisingly good uptake with the law firms, and that's been really edifying for us.
That's great to hear. Cool. The next question is, in the change that Roisin mentioned on disclosure per law or regulation, do you think regulation covers stock exchange rules?
I would say yes, if you're subject to, if it's like a DTR, disclosure and transparency rules type obligation, because it would be under the handbooks. But if it's just something that they require you to do, I would probably say no, if it's not sort of part of your regulatory obligations from transparency perspective. So, but it probably will be. That's not a very helpful answer, but if it falls into DTRs, yes. If it doesn't, don't know.
Yeah, maybe get some views from your law firm panel, or see whether how that would be interpreted by them. Did you invite Todd at 4 a.m.? Okay, I'm not even going to. Our company wants to try it with our procurement team first. I've tried to download it from, yes, okay. So Avril, you're saying that you unsuccessfully tried to download it from the One NDA site recently. One NDA went down for a few days over the weekend. And so, yes, now the home for One NDA is Clawstack. So there's a library tab in Clawstack. You need to sign up, it's free, but you can get access to the terms there. And then, cool. Can One NDA be used for NDA agreements for work related to highly sensitive personal data on a large scale, or would you recommend more bespoke agreements? Highly sensitive, yes. I mean, highly sensitive is just confidential information, so there's no reason why not. If you're talking about intellectual property and you're sharing intellectual property, then I don't think that that's something that you should be using an NDA for anyway, necessarily. And when it comes to personal data, no, because again, an NDA is not a suitable vehicle for you to share personal data, especially in the EU or the UK, where the GDPR or a variation of that applies. Article 28 requires you to have a written agreement in place with your data processor or the person that you're sharing it with that covers certain elements. And there's a checklist almost in Article 28. So you would need to have a DPA or the equivalent of that for you to be able to share personal data. So no, it's not meant for that. We have had feedback from the Australian market actually that says that adding personal data to an NDA is more common, which we understand. But for now, this isn't covered in One NDA. Cool. Okay, so finally, before we go, I just wanted to show everyone Clawstack.
Yeah.
So, am I the host?
Oh, maybe not. Hang on 2 seconds. There you go.
Cool. Okay, so Clawstack looks like this. So when you land on Clawstack, you need to sign up. As I said earlier, it's free. And then if you go to the landing page, there are some quick links here because we know that most people are coming to download version 2 of One NDA or One NDA plus M&A. And here you can go to the About section and you can read about why we set up One NDA, Clawstack rather, how it works and what a standard is, which is some thinking that we've been doing lately around what's a standard? Is it something, is it a good template or is it something that's had consensus from the community or from a smaller section of the community? And we think the latter, but any thinking that you have around that, please share. If you go to projects, what you'll see is that there's an open projects piece here. This will be populated on the 6th of April. There's a new project in the pipeline, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And here you can share your ideas on new projects. So we recently ran a survey to ask you what you thought we should do next. And we've added some of those here because it was before Clawstack was launched. So if you've got ideas for things that you'd like to see standardized next, please share. There are people out there that really want to run a project because it's good for them, it's good for their profile, it's fun, it's rewarding, it's giving back to the community. So people might pick up your idea and run with it. If you're one of those people that want to run a project, let us know and we can help set you up on Clawstack so that you can run a project and we can give you more information as well on how to do it and support you with carrying it out. If you go to the library here that Roisin showed us earlier, you'll see that there's a blob for each type of agreement. So for One NDA, you can go here to download it. You can find the release notes there around why we did what we did and the changes that we made. Previous version, more information about NDA, who's using it, etc. And here you can provide us with feedback. So just because we iterated and released version 2 doesn't mean that we won't release a version 3. So please provide us with your feedback. And we're treating One NDA as a product. So your continuous feedback is really valuable. You can do here the same here for One NDA. And as of recently, Bond Terms now also lives on Clawstack. Yep.
Thank you.
Of course. We have Common Paper, which is another organization that started recently with standards, and it's treating contracts as APIs. So we might speak to them in the future. And then Y Combinator. Y Combinator's forms have been used for years and they're really good. And we think that they are standards within the industry, especially in the startup world. And we will continue to populate this library with more standards as we see more and more projects. And also if you're running a standardization initiative and you want to have access to our community to get more feedback to really create a standard that's acceptable by a critical mass, then you can just get in touch with us and you can upload it here. And here you have the community. Here we ask people to just go in and introduce themselves and talk about what you do and who you are. We'll be populating this more with news and updates. We're very new, so we're trying to get everything done. And if you have ideas on how we can improve Clawstack, just come here and let us know. We've got an events tab here. as well. So this webinar, some legal events that are happening soon. So if you've got events that you want us to publish, let us know. And then finally, you can see all our members here and connect with them if you like. You can follow them, you can message them, you can reach out to them, you can collaborate with them. So it's a way for the legal community to come together. And yeah, if you've got any questions, just let me know.
Electra, what is the role of moderation on the platform, and how will that work?
So we will moderate the forums for now. We ask people to give us their full name, their real name, and a bit more information about them, because we don't want people that are going in there for the wrong reasons. It's really important that Clawstack is a safe space for lawyers that want to collaborate, and not not a place to sell your products, and not a place to troll people or anything like that. So we will moderate for now. And Kavisha in our team has that role, and so do I. And we'll see how it goes. Hopefully we won't need to moderate it too much.
And will all of the things in the library and the projects that get collaborated on Clawstack be released under open source licenses, under permissive licenses?
Good question. So it depends. So if you're an owner of a project and you want that, then you're welcome to do it. If you want to run a private project, then you can also do it. A fee will be payable for private projects, but there are groups of companies out there that want to create a standard for them, because they keep contracting with each other and they just don't want to negotiate anymore. So if you're doing it to benefit your industry or your organization, you can pay a fee and we will support you with running your project.
Oh, that's very interesting. So they can leverage the platform across a consortia or some other industry group that they keep private, but still get to utilize. Yeah, correct. That's very interesting.
Yeah, and they can use our tools and our methodology. So it's a benefit to them, which is value, which is why we ask for a fee.
And separately, I'll mention to you about maybe the law schools also could be very interested in this.
Interesting.
I think it's terrific.
Take a note of that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amanda.
Separate conversation. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me and allowing me to share a little bit about bond terms. And I know we're close to out of time here. I want to end with where I started, which is, again, I've been in this industry for 30 years. I have seen precious little innovation. Innovated myself at a law firm. We went to fixed fee. Doesn't seem like a big deal. Turned out to be night and day when you go to subscription fees. I think what you've done here is a very real thing. I think it's an important thing. I think it's helped advance how people think about how we do these deals. So congratulations on the success you've had in what is frankly a very short period of time with One NDA. And I really also respect and appreciate that you took the underlying machinery and really what you learned, I think, about how to run a project like this at scale, and are now making that available to everyone. So
thank you.
I think it's and it's a little frustrating being here in the US in Silicon Valley, and this got done over there in the UK first, but that's cool. We can learn from you, and now try and improve upon it a little bit and participate with you in it. But again, thank you very much for having me. It's great to be to have this opportunity to speak to your community and to just to learn more about what you're doing now.
We're grateful to have you here, Todd.
Really grateful. Thank you so much. Thanks for getting up so early in the morning, and really appreciate it. Yeah. And well done for bond terms. I think it's fantastic, and I know you're successful with it. So anything we can do to help, we're here.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you to everyone for joining. Good night to Sydney as well. And, bye.